Hello, welcome to Learning Life Podcast. My name is Tadisha, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a safe place where we can both learn and unlearn a lot of things about life. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to Learning Life Podcast. I'm your host, Tadisha. So I'm recording the day before Halloween. And I have some things to say. So I did like 2 minutes of research and I discovered that Halloween comes from a Celtic tradition that was brought over from Europe. And basically, people dressed up in costumes to scare away evil spirits. That's the basis of this holiday. I found that very interesting. It was mostly a Celtic tradition, which they did at the end of harvest season to mark the beginning of winter. And interesting enough, I find how Halloween is like over celebrated. It used to be just a child's holiday, and honestly, I haven't celebrated since I was a kid, going trick-or-treating. I never had the impulse to celebrate it after, age 11. Anyways, I found it very interesting learning about this, and I suggest you do your own research. But I have a little story to tie to it. Long time ago, years and years ago, I bought this incense, and it was called Celtic incense. And it looked really cute. It came in a tin can, and it was like colorful. It was like all these different colors, and it was granular. It looked like that candy they used to give kids that you would put in your mouth and it would like pop off. It looked like that. It looked like little pieces of candy. Anyways, I was a dodo. I didn't do my research before I bought something, and every time I would burn it or someone else in the house would burn it, it seemed like some strange stuff would happen. I remember something one time just falling on the floor. It was like by the TV or whatever. And I couldn't understand. I was like, okay, this is just, they say gravity. Somehow gravity had an effect. It was every time we used this incense, there was something peculiar that would happen. After a while, everybody made a connection that maybe it's this incense. What does Celtic really mean? If you look in history, Celtic people were in Western Europe into Britain, and they had their own traditions, that predate Christianity. So as they say, do the math. So Halloween is celebrated and publicized so much, but really, what is the origin of it? Again, do your own research. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but So now I want to go into today's topic, which I've really been just thinking about in my own personal life. You're probably familiar with the story of Lot and his family. They lived in a very corrupt city, Sodom and Gomorrah, and the story has always kind of irked me. I never understood why all those bad things happened. And so I've been analyzing and thinking about this story. Why did things go the way they did? I even think about Abraham. I'm like, Abraham spoke to God, and he went down to 10 people and asked God, if you find 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, will you spare the city? I always wondered in my head, I said, Abraham, why didn't he just go down to one person and just say, I have a nephew. He's one person. Will you spare the city? Abraham stopped at 10 people. That's always like irked me a little. But anyways, what I really want to focus on in the story of Lot is his wife. Lot's wife, whom I don't think they ever give a name to unless I've oversighted something. They were given instructions that the city of Sodom and Gomorrah was going to be destroyed, and they decided they had to leave immediately. And they were given the instructions not to look back. And what did Lot's wife do? She looked back and she became a pillar of salt. And this is the point I want to make here, is that she looked back and she became a pillar of salt. I'm kind of sharing this as, I'm analyzing it. And what came to me is that she should have been looking forward, but she was looking back. And she became, if you want to say it's a metaphor, her becoming a pillar of salt means that she was lifeless, she was stuck, she was paralyzed. And I start to think about how a lot of times people who suffer from trauma, they don't make progress forward in their life because they are constantly triggered or traumatized by current things that may happen in their life that makes them think of the past trauma. I've lived through this and I've had traumas, and I have to say, trauma will paralyze you. It will keep you stuck. You will not produce or be productive because you are stuck in a loop. A trauma loop is what I'll call it. And so her looking back is, I think, a message to people who are stuck. Consider it as a warning that if you continually look back, if you continually live life, you're driving forward, but you're continually looking back in the rearview mirror, as I've heard people say, all you can expect to do is to crash. There's a verse in the Bible that says, what plowman can he work looking back? In other words, how can you accomplish anything if you are continually looking back in the past? We have the past, we have the present, and we have the future. The past has already happened. The present is continually happening. And the future, I've heard some people give some really great metaphors about the past, the present, and the future. I wish I could say one of those things, but the future is what you make it. And so your present is becoming, your future is determined by what you're doing in the present. I'll give you maybe context. So for example, if you're trying to become a better person, to become a better person in the future, you have to do certain things today in the present, right? But if you are not actively doing anything presently, and you're constantly looking back, you are immobilized. And I feel that trauma, however means it comes, whether it's from childhood or from making foolish mistakes as a young adult, trauma will keep you from reaching your goals because you're constantly looking back, and then you see yourself in that mirror. You see yourself as a victim. One book that I have started reading a few months ago, and I've been reading it very slow, like snail speed, but it's a very powerful book. It's called The Body Keeps Score. Really powerful book about trauma. And that's one of the things that is discussed in this book, is that people who have suffered trauma, their minds, they've done these MRI scans, and they found out that when they have been triggered and they start to memorize the trauma, their brain goes into this stage where it's reenacting the experience as if it is happening in the present. There's this thing nowadays where they separate science from the Bible, or they make science seem that it is without God, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. God created science. In a way, God is the ultimate scientist because he put all the elements together in the earth. Everything is made of elements and atoms, and God created it, and it's beautiful, right? But scientists nowadays, I've seen so many scientists say they're atheists and they don't believe in God. That's a total other story. I'm getting off topic. But the point I'm trying to say here is that these scientists have observed that people in the state of trauma, they relive the trauma as if it's in the present. And why is it that we take these things and we don't parallel it, these natural things that scientists observe, and parallel it with the Word of God, because if you really analyze it for yourself, you'll see there's so much that is true. In other words, the science, the Word of God basically is the truth. And when science discovers something, I've often noticed it matches up. But however, the scientists, being full of pride and whatever, egos, they deny a lot of things. But I don't want to get off topic here. The point here is that trauma paralyzes. And it is like the trauma response is panic, is not being able to move forward, which is embodied in the fact that Lot's wife, when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt, unmovable. If there's anything that you can get out of this message, is that whatever you've been through, there is something to learn from it, but you cannot become a victim to your past. You cannot allow your mind to put you into a loop of thinking of that bad experience and continually allowing it to hold you back. If anything, you've got to learn how to use that pain. I know this is a overrated saying. Use the pain as fuel. At least use it as some type of motivation to say, hey, I wouldn't want to continue to live like this in a victim mentality, because it gets you nowhere, and you will not live a fulfilling life if you are living in victim mentality. All right, so I'm going to leave it at this, wrap it up at that point. I hope you got something good out of today's episode. I probably am going to have to take a deeper dive into this in the future when I've got a little bit more, because I don't want to go off topic. I feel like I could go off topic right now, and I want you just to grasp this point that I'm trying to share. So, thank you so much for tuning in. On a side note, I've been a little bit more active on social media lately, and I would just appreciate it because it helps me to grow this channel and this community. If you would subscribe to either this podcast or my social media, which is @Tadisha1 on Instagram, or you can follow me on the Learning Life Podcast on Instagram and TikTok, or just push the subscribe button on YouTube here. I appreciate your support, and that would really help me to keep growing this podcast. And so thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take care and stay blessed. This is Learning Life Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you learned something, that you enjoyed this episode. If you want to support this podcast, please subscribe. Thank you so much. See you next week.